Welcome to the YouTube channel, and today we will discuss about Ghaznavid Empire. The sources of this video are Wikipedia, ChatGPT, Mongol, and the Islamic World Book written by Peter Jackson. Without any further waiting, let's start the video. The Ghaznavid Empire was a powerful Persianate Muslim empire from 977 to 1186, which at its greatest extent extended from the Oxus to the Indus Valley. The Ghaznavid Sultanate was founded by Sebüktigin upon his succession to the rule of Ghazna after the death of his father-in-law, Alptigin, who was an ex-general of the Samanid Empire from Balkh. Now, further discussing the empire, let's talk about Sebüktigin and Alptigin. Who are they and what is this Samanid Empire? Abu Mansur Nasr ad-Din wad-Dawla Sebüktigin, also known as Sebüktigin, was the founder of the Ghaznavid dynasty, an emir of Ghazna from 977 to 997. Sebüktigin was a Turkic slave who was bought by Alptigin, the commander of the royal guard of the Samanid dynasty. Alptigin established himself as the governor of Ghazna in 962 and died a year later in 963. Afterwards, Sebüktigin built his prestige among other slave soldiers in Ghazna until he was elected by them as their ruler in 977. Sebüktigin expanded his rule down to the south of present-day Afghanistan and north of Baluchistan. Through conflicts with the Hindu Shahi dynasty of Kabul, he invaded Indian lands, opening the gates of India for the future monarchs of his dynasty. Now, after knowing a little about Sebüktigin, who is Alptigin? Alptigin, or Alptekin, was a Turkic slave commander of the Samanid Empire, who would later become the semi-independent governor of Ghazna from 962 until he died in 963. Before becoming governor of Ghazni, Alptigin was the commander-in-chief, Sipasalar, of the Samanid army in Khorasan. In a political fallout over the succession of the Samanids, he crossed the Hindu Kush mountains southward and captured Ghazna, located strategically between Kabul and Kandahar in present-day Afghanistan, and thereby establishing his principality, which, however, was still under Samanid authority. He was succeeded by his son, Abu Ishaq Ibrahim. Okay, enough of the background info now, let's talk about the Ghaznavid. Sebüktigin's son, Mahmud of Ghazni, expanded the Ghaznavid Empire to the Amu Darya, the Indus River, and the Indian Ocean in the east, and to Ray and Hamadan in the west. Under the reign of Masud I, the Ghaznavid dynasty began losing control over its western territories to the Seljuk Empire after the Battle of Dandana Khan in 1040, resulting in a restriction of its holdings to modern-day Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northern India. In 1151, Sultan Bahram Shah lost Ghazni to the Ghurid Sultan Ala al-Din Hussein. The Ghaznavids retook Ghazni but lost the city to the Guz Turks, who in turn lost it to Muhammad of Ghor. In response, the Ghaznavids fled to Lahore, their regional capital. In 1186, Lahore was conquered by the Ghurid Sultan Muhammad of Ghor, with its Ghaznavid ruler, Kusara Malik, imprisoned and later executed. Let's understand the background history first. Major powers in the region at that time. The Samanid Empire was based in Central Asia, especially in places like Bukhara, Samarkand, and Khorasan, modern-day Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, eastern Iran, and Afghanistan. They were originally strong but were declining due to internal conflicts between generals and ministers. The capital was Bukhara. Then comes the Safarid dynasty, based in southeastern Iran, especially around Sistan. They had some control in southern Khorasan, south of the Amu Darya River, but by this time they were weak and under pressure. Then comes the Buid dynasty, a Persian Shia dynasty that ruled western Iran and Iraq, including Baghdad. They were strong and growing, They were pressuring the Safavids and influencing the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad. And finally, the Karluks and the Kara Khanid Khanate. The Karluks were a Turkic tribe who had converted to Islam. They invaded from the northeast, Central Asia. In 992, they captured Bukhara, the Samanid capital, and founded the Kara Khanid Khanate. This marked a major blow to the Samanids. It was a time of a battle between old Persian elites and modern Turkic converts. The Samanids and Safavids were old Persian-speaking Muslim dynasties, but both were weakening. The Buyids were another Persian dynasty, but stronger and more dominant than the Safavids. The Karluks were new Muslim converts, Turkic nomads, who saw an opportunity in the chaos and took over important cities like Bukhara. In simple words, the Samanid Empire was falling apart because of fighting between their generals and ministers. The Safavids, who ruled nearby areas, were also too weak to help or take over. The Buyids were stronger, but focused on western Iran and Baghdad. Into this mess came the Karluks, a Turkic tribe, who invaded and took over Bukhara. This marked the rise of Turkic power and the decline of Persian-led empires in Central Asia. Enough of the background information, now let's head to our main story. During the time of the Samanid dynasty, it had powerful Turkic slave soldiers, called gulams, and two important military families grew out of them, Simjarids and Ghaznavids. Eventually, both of these families caused big problems for the Samanid rulers. Let's try to understand the political battle between these two factions, because it will in the future lead to the development of the Ghaznavid Empire. So basically, as far as we know, there were two factions in the Samanid court: Alptigin, future founder of the Ghaznavids, and Abu al-Hasan Simjari, who was a Simjarid, who were both rivals. They both wanted to control Khorasan, a rich and important province, and indirectly control the whole Samanid Empire. When the Samanid king Abdul Malik I died in 961, a power struggle broke out among his brothers. Alptigin and Abu al-Hasan Simjari each tried to put a prince on the throne who would listen to them, but the court ministers, who were civilian bureaucrats, not soldiers, didn't want Alptigin to become too powerful. So they made Mansur I the new ruler instead of the one Alptigin supported. Alptigin realized he had lost the political fight, so he left and went south beyond the Hindu Kush Mountains, modern-day Afghanistan, and captured the city of Ghazna and ruled it in the name of the Samanid Empire, at least officially. During this whole drama, something else was happening around the Middle East. The Safavids, another dynasty, still had control of parts of Khorasan south of the Amu Darya River, but they were weak because they were being pushed by another Persian dynasty, the Buyids. As the Samanid Empire kept getting weaker, its internal power struggles between generals and court ministers made things worse. This decline allowed outside Turkic tribes, like the Karluks, who had recently converted to Islam, to invade. In 992, the Karluks captured Bukhara, the Samanid capital, and started their kingdom called the Kara Khanid Khanate. Alptigin ruled Ghazni for a year, and when he died in 963, after 2 Ghulam governors and 3 years, his slave Sebuktigin became the governor of Ghazni. Now let's move to Sebuktigin. Sebuktigin lived as a Mamluk, a Turkic slave soldier. He was bought as a slave by Alptigin to be raised as an elite soldier. He later married his master's daughter, becoming son-in-law of Alptigin. Alptigin conquered the city of Ghazni from the local Hindu Lawik rulers in 962. Wait a second, who are these Lawik rulers? The Lawik dynasty was the last native dynasty that ruled Ghazni before the Ghaznavid conquest in present-day Afghanistan. Lawiks were originally Hindus, but later became Muslims. They were closely related to the Hindu Shahis, and after 877 ruled under the Hindu Shahi suzerainty. To know more about this dynasty, I will make a separate video. Now let's focus on our topic. After Alptigin's death, his son Abu Ishaq Ibrahim governed Ghazna for 3 years. His death was followed by the reign of a former Ghulam of Alptigin, Bilgatigan. Bilgatigan's rule was so harsh that the populace invited Abu Bakr Lawak back. Now let's talk about Abu Bakr Lawak in brief. He was a ruler of Ghazni from the Lawak dynasty. He was most likely a vassal of the Ghaznavid Empire. In 962, the Turkic slave commander Alptigin captured Ghazni after besieging the citadel of Ghazni for 4 months. However, a few years later, Lawak managed to recapture the town from Abu Ishaq Ibrahim.